This is 5 on 20 News, where the headlines are hot off the press and the newscasters have been let off the chain, with Jeff Weber
and Sean Madrid, coming to you live from our studio in downtown Tucson. First, the local headlines.
Last night, the TUSD board voted 4-1 to pass a resolution committing support to all students regardless of their immigration status. The resolution cites the 1982 Plyer versus Doe Supreme Court case. That case states that administration, teachers, counselors, and staff should support all students equally, whether immigration status is documented or undocumented. Crystal Foster, who proposed the recent TUSD resolution, said that Tucson families have become alarmed since the election of Donald Trump. Students are worried at the prospect of deportation because of the statements Trump made on the campaign trail. TUSD wants to show students that they will stand up for them in case immigration laws are tightened. The board unanimously voted to rid 6 Tucson area schools of their magnet status. The magnet label requires schools to have special programs in order to promote a diverse student body. A federally appointed advisor said this year that the schools didn't meet the diversity levels of a magnet school. Losing the magnet label will cost the city $3 million in federal funds. In rare, positive news for Tucson school teachers, the board also approved a $700 a year raise for the 2017-2018 school year. The board also voted to draw down the Prop 301 fund to zero, meaning more funding should be delivered to the school system. Passed in 2000, Prop 301 approved a tax hike that would fund pay for performance programs among TUSD school teachers. But the fund has been criticized for not being dispersed correctly, with most of the money still not spent. School funding has become a hot-button issue after it was revealed that Arizona ranks 49 out of 50 in terms of per-pupil spending in the U.S.
The incoming Arizona House Speaker is considering launching a lawsuit against Prop 206. The proposition would raise the minimum wage to $12 an hour. House Speaker J.D. Menard says that the wage hike might be unconstitutional if the law requires state funding. The issue stems from companies that are contracted by state government, like those that provide services for developmentally disabled. These companies claim that they won't be able to survive without help from the state or an exemption. But Attorney Jim Barton, who represents Prop 206 backers, says that the initiative doesn't even include state employees. So Menard's point is moot. Menard says that he hasn't reached a conclusion yet about whether to proceed with the lawsuit. He is reviewing the legality of the law, which he'll then ignore if it doesn't agree with his preconceived notions.
Second in command at the Department of Veterans Affairs visited Tucson yesterday, and he wasn't here for a friendly chat. Sloan Gibson came to Arizona after reports of fraud over hospital wait times. Gibson said that he will hold workers at the Southern VA responsible for any falsification of patient records. The Tucson VA has been criticized for long wait times, and a report from the Office of Inspector General showed that wait times were falsely recorded to appear shorter than they actually were. Gibson said that his agency will look to improve wait times, including adding staffing. He looked, or rather squinted, at the bright side, mentioning that the hospital has a low turnover rate of registered nurses compared to other hospitals. So that's something, I guess. The Tucson hospital is rated 2 out of 5 stars for overall service.
And Arizona is one of only 3 states that have not received a commutation from President Obama. So far, Obama has commissioned 1,023 commutations for nonviolent federal criminals. That's the record for any president in history and more than the last 11 presidents combined. This includes 70 full pardons, including 1 Arizona man held in a Texas prison. However, no one held in an Arizona federal prison has received a commutation so far. There still are a few weeks to go for Obama to be Santa Claus for an Arizona prisoner. There are currently more than 179,000 inmates in federal prisons, with over 46% jailed for drug offenses.
National Geographic has named Tucson as one of the 10 best winter trips for 2017. The publication singled out the Old Pueblo's food as a prime reason to visit the city, specifically calling out the Sonoran dog as a draw. Their article mentioned Tucson staples Huelo Canelo and BK, along with the El Perro Loco food truck and restaurants such as Boca Tacos y Tequila and Tacos Apson.
And I wanted to take a moment to talk about the program you're watching right now. Here at 5 on 20, we are undertaking a new kind of citizen journalism. We're going to give you the news as we see it, and we want more people to speak up with us. We need writers, hosts, anchors, camera people, sound people, the whole gamut. The times require a new way of informing ourselves, so join us. Do it now. Email us at info@creativetucson.org to get involved. And if you think there's a story we're missing, a person we should interview, an upcoming event we should cover, or have any news tips for us, shoot us an email to info@creativetucson.org. We are here for you, and we want to cover all the stories from all points of view, so don't be strangers. Now, in national and international news.
A temporary deal was reached to allow the evacuation of civilians in Aleppo this morning, but fighting resumed in Aleppo, and evacuations had been due to start at 5:03 GMT, did not go ahead. Fresh shelling was reported several hours later. Under the evacuation deal, civilians and rebels from eastern Aleppo were to be allowed to go to rebel-held areas in northern Syria. The breakdown of the deal, which was brokered by Russia and Turkey, is being attributed to demands from the government's side. Syrian activists who also say airstrikes over rebel-held territory have resumed. They are said to be seeking the evacuation of injured fighters and civilians from nearby towns. Russia, Syria's ally, said that the Syrian army resumed firing after the rebels broke the truce. One resident, Zohair, told the BBC there was total chaos. Quote, "We don't know how many casualties there are and if there is anyone to help them." Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said he expected the rebels would stop their resistance in the next 2 to 3 days. Turkish President Erdogan, meanwhile, accused Syrian forces of breaking the ceasefire deal and called the situation in Aleppo, quote, "very fragile." He also says he is going to speak with Russian leader Vladimir Putin later in the day. Russia said on Tuesday that the Syrian government is in complete control of Aleppo, where the Syrian military crushed the city. 82 civilians were reportedly killed in the fighting by Syrian forces and Shiite militias from Iraq and Iran. A list of the dead reported to the UN include 11 women and 13 children. Over 100,000 people have fled the city in the past few weeks, making their way to government-controlled areas or Kurdish areas in the north.
Ohio Governor John Kasich has vetoed a bill that would make abortion illegal once a heartbeat is detected. But don't celebrate yet, you heathen pro-choice advocates, because Kasich isn't done. He did sign a bill that would create an abortion ban after 20 weeks. Similar laws have passed in 15 states. Take a guess at which 15 states these are. The 20-week rule stems from the belief that fetuses can feel pain after that period. Health experts have challenged this view, saying that a fetus does not feel pain until 27 or 28 weeks. Kasich rejected the heartbeat bill, not because it's insane, but rather due to finances. He says that Ohio taxpayers would have to pay for the inevitable court battle that would follow the passage of the bill. Planned Parenthood said that the bill would simply force women to travel long distances and cross state lines in order to receive a safe abortion. As anti-abortion forces are all hopped on their own power of shaming, they're looking to spread further laws across the country. Republicans in Congress are looking to submit legislation that would enact the 20-week ban nationwide. They also plan to defund Planned Parenthood, a long sought-after goal that's become the Republicans' grand prize. Donald Trump has promised to support both measures. If this bums you out, there's a silver lining. On Tuesday, Oklahoma threw out a law that would require doctors to be present during abortions. The law would have essentially outlawed abortion in the state in a sneaky way. So it looks like Hillary Clinton's loss was the first shot in the war against women occurring over the next 4 years.
In a reversal of past statements, the EPA has found that fracking can impact drinking water. The statement comes after a 5-year study into the effects of hydraulic fracturing, commonly known as fracking. Fracking involves pumping a high-pressured stream of water and chemicals into the ground in order to loosen shale rock and release natural gas and oil. The widespread practice of fracking has resulted in a boom in U.S. oil and gas production. It is the primary reason why gas has been less than $2 for the past couple of years. But while we can fill our cars on the cheap, fracking has also been found responsible for contamination in water supplies. It has also been linked to an increase in earthquakes in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Ohio, where fracking is common. In the study, the EPA found effects on drinking water through each stage of the fracking process, with the effects occurring most in areas near fracking wells. The effects range from temporary water quality changes to wells becoming unusable due to contamination. Shockingly, the American Petroleum Institute blasted the report and claimed that they protect water resources at every step of the fracking process. In May 2015, the EPA released a statement that fracking had not led to widespread impacts to drinking water resources. But the EPA released the statement without, studying the effects of fracking. So I see how they could be confused. Peter Thorne of the EPA's Science Advisory Board stands by the statement. He says that it's still not proven that fracking causes widespread contamination, focusing on the word widespread. But if your tap water is green, you're probably worried about it, whether the problem qualifies as widespread or not.
Incoming Attorney General Jeff Sessions is being accused of glossing over a history of racially insensitive comments. Last week, Sessions completed a questionnaire that's required in order for him to take office. Sessions listed his employment record, but did not mention his failed attempt to become a federal judge. The questionnaire asks about past unsuccessful candidacies, which Sessions left blank. Sessions was rejected for the judge's position because of past statements implying support for the KKK. In 1986, lawyers claimed that Sessions made a comment that the KKK was all right until he learned that they smoked marijuana. 20 civil rights groups have delivered a letter to the president-elect asking him to reconsider his pick, as if Donald Trump would ever question his own judgment. On the questionnaire, Sessions also fudged a question related to cases he personally handled as a lawyer. He mentioned 4 civil rights cases that weren't found on his 1986 application for judgeship. Opponents are claiming that Sessions is trying to rebrand himself as a champion of civil rights when they say that he merely attached his name to legal filings, a standard practice for U.S. attorneys. Senator Dianne Feinstein also says that Sessions neglected to mention 2 speeches he gave to anti-immigrant groups. One speech from 2003 was for an event for Restoration Weekend, and the other was an American immigration reform event in 2007. Before he can become Attorney General, Sessions will have to go through congressional review. Fellow Republicans in Congress have advised him not to wear white.
Well, it looks as though Kanye West is a gold digger after all. The quickly deteriorating rapper visited Donald Trump at Trump Tower yesterday. Let's watch a video of Yeezy and our president-elect after their rendezvous. It's basically the most awkward interaction of all time. Take a look.
Just friends, and he's a good man. Doing well. Long time. We've been friends for a long time. Life. We discussed it.
2020 and 2020. Do you think that's something you still want to do in light of this meeting? Kanye, are you considering performing at the inauguration? Kanye, no comment about your meeting with the president-elect. This is the president-elect of the United States. Nothing to say?
I just want to take a picture right now.
Do you wish you were voting for him, Kanye?
So long, man. You take care of yourself. I'll see you soon. All right?
After his meeting with the Donald, Kanye took to Twitter saying he met with Trump to discuss issues of diversity, including education and the violence in Chicago. As you might remember, Kanye ran into some controversy last month when he announced his support for Trump at a concert, which was met with boos. And yet, Kanye says he didn't vote in the last election, which he doesn't seem to realize is kind of part of supporting a political candidate. Perhaps Trump is in process of planning his inauguration because on the same day he met with Kanye, Trump disinvited Motley Crue lead singer Vince Neil from performing at the Trump inauguration ceremony. Neil says that he was given an invite last week to perform, but was disinvited after the band submitted their passports to the Secret Service. Perhaps Trump recently picked up Motley Crue's biography, The Dirt, and became jealous at the amount of women Neil was able to score with. If the strange events of this election are any indicator, we may very well see Kanye and Trump performing a duet of That's My Bitch. Despite the disinvitation, Vince Neil is taking this series of events in stride and says he plans to continue ballooning in weight until he becomes Meatloaf.
Two recently released studies show how money and cultural background impacts education levels. The first study, by the National Bureau of Economic Research, found that school districts that increased funding levels had higher student test scores than those who didn't. Go figure. They studied 26 states that changed the way they funded public schools after 1990, the date when federal courts changed public school financing. The researchers found that test scores rose when states directed more money to their poorest districts. The funding increases at least double achievement scores across the board and also decreased class sizes. Class size is a key factor in successful schools. The study also focused on long-term effects in students and found that a 10% increase in per pupil spending led to a 10% rise in wages when these students became adults. Do you remember what we said about Tucson per pupil spending earlier in the show? Yeah, well, we rank 49th out of 50 states in spending. It's no surprise Tucson schools are lagging. But who would have thought education would be a smart investment? The second study from the Pew Research Center looked at educational outcomes among different religious backgrounds. They found that Hindus, Jews, Muslims, and Buddhists had higher educational outcomes. Christians had the lowest educational outcomes in the US, but they found that worldwide, Jews had the highest level of education. They say that this is largely because most Jews either live in Israel or the United States. Religious groups such as Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists had the lowest educational outcomes worldwide, but the study notes that Muslims are slowly making gains.
American scientists are frantically trying to copy government studies related to climate change. They fear that Donald Trump will have the information erased. Efforts to quickly grab the data has resulted in a guerrilla archiving being organized in Toronto, where scientists will gather together to copy public information. And at the University of Pennsylvania, professors are discussing how to download as much government data as possible before Trump's inauguration. Their fears come from Trump's latest batch of cabinet appointments, which are chock full of climate change deniers who dismiss man-made climate change as a hoax. On the campaign trail, Trump promised to overturn all of Obama's environmental rulings, including pulling out of the Paris Accord. If the U.S. were to leave the Paris Agreement, then the climate deal would be finished, as it states that it can only be ratified if countries representing 55% of carbon emissions signed on. With the U.S. being the second largest emitter of carbon, their participation is necessary for passage. A Trump advisor also suggested that NASA should no longer conduct climate change studies and should instead focus on space exploration. Lamar Smith, the Republican head of the House Science Committee, is trying to subpoena the groups to stop their copying efforts, but supporters have reached out online, with investors offering financial support and lawyers offering to work pro bono. Database experts have also donated free server space to hold the enormous amount of government data.
And scientists may have solved one of the most vexing questions for us all. Why don't we have a penis bone? A team from the University College London set out to measure and trace the evolution of penis bones among the world's animals. Mammals and primates around the world have a penis bone called a baculum. Kit Opie of the university led the study and wrote the sexiest research proposal ever. The team found that the penis bone evolved in mammals 95 million years ago and existed in the first primates from 50 million years ago. Baculums then became bigger in some animals, such as walruses, with an envy-inducing 2-foot-long baculum, or smaller in others. Researchers also found that the stump-tailed macaque, which weighs only 22 pounds, has an enormous baculum. Ornithologists say that this accounts for the supreme confidence of the macaque in the wild. One other fact gleaned from the study is that chimps' baculum is about the size of a human fingernail. But like they say, it's not the size, but how you use it. Among some chimpanzee groups, the female chimp mates with all the males. This is a survival strategy meant to protect her babies by making the males think that they may be the father, a strategy humans also practice. So what are the final conclusions from the team? They believe that humans lost their penis bone when we became monogamous because we weren't competing for females the way the chimps were. Since we don't need our little guy at the ready, then we can rest easy and flaccid.
And Amazon announced today that they have successfully made their very first drone delivery. Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos says that on December 7th, an autonomous drone dropped off an Amazon Fire Stick to a dude named Richard who lives in the UK. From order to doorstep, the delivery took just 13 minutes. These drone deliveries do require a large yard for packages to land on and a landing pad with a code that instructs drones where to touch down. But Americans shouldn't get too excited about the prospect of becoming even lazier. So far, Amazon has only been permitted to fly drones beyond the line of sight of a pilot in the UK. The US government has not yet approved a similar measure, but if a deal goes through between Amazon, NASA, and the FAA, you might be able to get rolls of toilet paper and toothpaste flown to your house in minutes by 2019. This was Jeff Weber
And Sean Madrid for 5 on 20 News. Next up, Sophie Gibson-Rush tells us what's what with Tucson music this week.
Hello, Tucson. I'm Sophie Gibson-Rush, and this is Strong Sound. I'm here to talk with you about local music and what it's good for. At any given time, there are a handful of Tucson bands with great potential. To me, potential means a lot more than musical talent. Talent is wonderful, but we no longer live in an economy where talent is talented and simply waits to be discovered. To have potential today, you have to have some business savvy, some marketing chops, and an aesthetic vision, an online presence, and of course, you have to be willing to work like crazy. This list of requirements sounds like suffocating distraction from creativity to some artists, which brings me to record labels. What do they do? How can they help? And are they scam artists and scoundrels? So before I started working on this segment, I really didn't understand how record labels worked. My go-to conversation was how major labels scam artists, and that sucks. That's true. There are plenty of instances of huge music celebrities going bankrupt because of unfair or even criminal contracts. After reading up on it, though, my understanding is that record labels often spell positive change for an artist's career. And beyond that, we have several local record labels popping up in Tucson. Baby Gas Mask, Commercial Appeal, Hocus Bogus, and Baby Tooth are made up of our friends, neighbors, and sweethearts. My sense is that they have little interest in deceit and more in benefiting local musicians. So before we dive into this brave new music scene, here are a couple of useful facts about record labels. There are major labels, and then there are indie labels. Quite a few indie labels are owned by major labels, or indie labels are a large conglomerate of indie labels. Today I'm going to deal mostly with indie labels and their structure. We no longer live in a culture of discovery or big breaks, as I said. This is no longer an industry where you can send your demo to the A&R department and some guy will listen to it and then throw it on his boss's desk. Record labels still accept submissions, but the chances of someone listening to your CD are pretty low. It's much better to focus on growing your reputation through your own talent, marketing, and releases. If you have a fan base, buzz, and ambition, chances are you have the capability of drawing the attention of an indie record label. Record labels want to know before they sign a band if it's a great investment. So what do record labels offer musicians that they can't do for themselves? Record labels offer an advance for expenses that musicians would regularly struggle to pay. Expenses like recording, production, or touring costs. This is an advance, so it's offered with the stipulation that it will be paid back. Think of it as an interest-free loan. That's the most important aspect of the whole relationship. The idea is that by lifting the financial pressure on musicians, they can relax, be more creative, and write that heroic album that will make everyone rich. Record labels also offer an invaluable connection to the music industry, from producers to venues to directors for music videos to album artists to the indispensable PR and marketing companies they employ. Record labels are there to present and nurture artists in order to make money. The list of services offered varies widely from label to label. Contracts are where it comes down to brass tacks. This is a legally binding agreement between artist and label. Every contract will be different, but essentially, signing with a label will provide you with monetary advances, that interest-free loan I mentioned, to be paid back in full. Commonly, it's paid back through placement, album sales, or merchandise. The majority of the time, a label will own your masters. They work to get placement for the song on TV, film, advertisements, the World Wide Web, whatever. For many indie labels and artists, this is where there's real money-making potential. Depending on the contract, artists sometimes will have the opportunity to buy back their masters at the end of the term. This is what Jack White did with the White Stripes, and he got them before the prices skyrocketed. Smarty pants. It's good to look for protection for artists in the contracts too. Spending caps on the record label are great if you don't want to end up paying back the $10,000 they spent on PR. Similarly, watch out for giant advances. All advances are against the future earning of the band. Read carefully is all I'm saying, and please do your research. It's a strange relationship between an artist and a label, but in the end, they want the same thing, to make the artist wildly successful. Most of the time, this relationship works out great for all. When they don't, well, Neil Young, who incidentally loved his label, said it best. Artists have a choice of what they can do. Artists who want to go at it alone should just do that. All right, on to the calendar for this weekend. Tonight is the 191 Tool Open House. This venue was recently acquired by the Rialto Theater, and it hits that sweet spot between booking famous touring bands and giving local bands a great stage to develop. Katie Haverly, Joe Novelli, and Gabriel Sullivan will perform tonight. Don't miss the KXCI jukebox along the eastern wall. KXCI put 100 hand-picked CDs into this gorgeous machine. Pop in a quarter and enjoy some of them. Anyone out there remember Scrappies, by the way? Also tonight, the not local but awesome Juilliard String Quartet, presented by Arizona Friends of Chamber Music, comes to the Leo Rich Theater. This is one of the top 3 string quartets in the country, and they're playing Beethoven, Mendelssohn, and a contemporary composer called Davidovsky. I also just learned this afternoon that this concert is sold out, so classical music lives! Thursday night, Hey Bucko plays at Tap and Bottle. The trio always makes the night better with their instrumental Western charisma. Grab a beer and you got the whole kit and caboodle right there. Bluegrass Babes, Run Boy Run play at the Rialto on Friday. This is a crew of masters. Every single person in this band is an expert at their instrument, and it's riveting to see them live because they're so detailed and tight. They're enjoying a well-deserved international success, which puts them at a place in their career where they pretty much professionally tour all the time. So welcome home for a bit, you guys. While you're there, pick up their album, I Would Fly, which came out in September. Sunday is La Fiesta de Guadalupe at De Grazia Gallery. The festival celebrates Mexico's patron saint with performances by weirdly talented mariachi and folklorico kids, Domingo de Gracia's Spanish guitar band, a Yaqui deer dance ceremony, and Las Posadas procession by Carrillo Magnet School students. I'm in. It sounds like a wonderful way to celebrate our strange border cultural hybrid. Tucson, it's always a pleasure. Email me, gibsonrushmusic@gmail.com, if you want me to consider including events or topics in this segment. For now, I'm off, but feel free to stick around and relish in some Run Boy Run.
1, 2.
Didn't